Now we will have panel discussion moderated by Adam Peake from Internet Corporation for Sign Names and Numbers. And our panelists are Ulrich, Georgia, Tomas, Ivo, and Timo. So please have a good discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. And you've already spoken to the panelists, you've heard the panelists' presentations, so different points of view of role of DNS in securing the internet. So I think a common thought this morning has been mentioned about DNSSEC. So we'll kick off with the idea, actually, how useful is DNSSEC for securing the internet itself? We know about it, we know it's being deployed, we know it's in some regions, it's not in others. So what's the who would like to kick off with how useful, how valuable is DNSSEC to securing the internet? Yeah.
Yeah, well, DNSSEC, how useful is it? And I mean, it secures the DNS, and I think one mentioned today, should we continue with it? It's a low uptake, and why we do this? And so what I want to say is like, okay, would we do the DNS today again in the same way if we would invent it again? We probably wouldn't. And why wouldn't we? Because we would like to have a protocol with security built in, right? And we do this with all our protocols. You know, we have HTTP, and we somehow made it into HTTPS, and we have all these other protocols, and we try to push in security, and we need to do this in DNS too. And I haven't heard any alternative proposal of how to secure the DNS. The best thing we have is DNSSEC. And if we think of security, we cannot, it's not a monolith or something, but if you work in security, you know that security is built in layers. And let's have an example. So a few years back, there was this attack on MyEther wallet. And MyEther wallet is a website where you actually can use your blockchain wallet for Ethereum and, send money and stuff like that. And you can think of the blockchain whatever you want, but for a lot of people, this is real money. And there was this attack. And what the people did is that they hijacked address space of Amazon for Route 53. They hijacked the name servers, the IP addresses. They got the DNS traffic to their own name servers. And the only thing they did was answer with falsified addresses for myetherwallet.com. And so people went to the wrong website, send money to the wrong addresses, get, scammed out of their money. And and if you look at this attack, it could have been prevented by using RPKI, securing routing. The whole attack would have fallen at the same moment, would be impossible to do. Actually, this attack led to that Amazon has implemented RPKI in all of their data centers, and that they even require their customers to RPKI sign their routes if they bring their own IP addresses to Amazon. If myetherwallet.com had been DNSSEC signed, the attack wouldn't have worked because the validating resolvers of the world would have said, no, this is false data. And the last stage was that people went to this website, and actually there came up this warning, this certificate isn't really what it looks like, it should look like. And most people didn't go to the website and said, okay, something's fishy. But enough of them clicked, well, I want to do it anyway, and were scammed out of their money. And so we see that we have to have all these stages in place to really be able to protect the internet. And that's why I think that DNSSEC is so important, and that we have to do this work. And the low uptake is not really an argument to not do it. I mean, nobody asked for safety belts in the car. When safety belts in the car came, people were opposed to it. And actually, people started using it when there was a law that said you have to. Before that, it was just like, and so, do we need a law for DNSSEC? I hope not. But we need to do stuff to make it, to spread it on the internet and to spread it to the right people to use it.
Any response, Timo or Thomas or you?
I would totally agree that security is layers, call it onion or a cake, whichever you like, and we have to accept that DNSSEC is just one of that of these layers, and it's not a solution. It's not an end solution, and what we trying to advocate is simplifying deployment of DNSSEC for second-level domains. For example, maybe you don't need have to have a zone signing key and key signing key. Maybe you have to use only a combined signing key. Maybe you don't have to rotate your keys, let's say every year for the second-level domains. Do these things selectively, and if some part of DNSSEC is very complicated to you, maybe there is an option to reduce that complication. You don't need to implement the same level of security as a root does for the second-level domains. I think that might encourage registrars to use DNSSEC more.
Policy issues from your studies, Georgia, of are there policy answers to deployment of DNSSEC? Should we be mandating it, or should ICANN be doing more to mandate DNSSEC deployment, or where are the CCTLDs in this?
It's a good question. I think, I was in the last ICANN that I went to in Kigali a few days ago, which feels like a few weeks ago actually now. But one of the questions came up during the SSAC session around DNSSEC and what we should do and if we should mandate it. And I can't remember who, but someone drew up this important point of, normal people don't really care. So I think the point would be to how we actually bring awareness to normal people, and people who are not in this world of DNS that we see and that we're so familiar with and close to in this bubble that we are in. The sort of person who might be selling cupcakes or person who's just, using the internet for their own use. I think it's really important to make that kind of thing accessible to them. So I'd say that's a really important thing that I found in looking at the policy behind DNSSEC is that the technology can be really, really helpful. But if people don't see the value, then they won't care or use it. So that's the important thing I would bring to this.
Ivo, you have any comments on this, or should we move on to more horrible questions?
Yeah. I think you talk about value so that people can see that. I think it relates to also to technical thing. DNSSEC is pretty good, I think. And maybe it's missing if we imagine it's a burglar's or alarm. And this alarm doesn't sound, it's silent. So it somehow automatically works, burglars are taken away, everything works, but if we sit in the house or we are not in the house, we don't know whether alarm sounded, and we don't have the information about what was the attacker, was the attacker maybe just very well prepared, or it was opportunistic attack. So this, if we could address this, maybe we could measure potential threat, and then we can interest more users to apply for DNSSEC.
So understanding the threats and who's making them and how. So how would we do that? And who might do that?
I think it's a technical thing, and then just I brought it as a potential problem.
Right.
So maybe it could be additional add-on in the future for the DNSSEC.
Right. Okay. Anybody from the audience want to ask questions about what you thought this morning as you've heard different questions? And Andrew.
Specifically on DNSSEC, I don't know if you've seen it, but Jeff Houston put out a really good blog post a few weeks ago, and he's not known to be a DNS skeptic, in fairness, and he does back up his arguments with data. He's put quite a lengthy blog post out, as he often does, which I won't attempt to summarise, but I'll read just one sentence from near the very bottom, which says, DNSSEC as we know it today is just not going anywhere. It's too complex, too fragile, and just too slow to use for the majority of services and their users. And then he poses a question, what do we need to do to fix that? So I suppose building on that, the point I throw out is, which I sort of made earlier in one of the other presentations, is I think part of the problem is it's been designed by people who aren't implementers. They're not the people that deploy stuff. They're not the operational people. I think really what we need is to grasp this opportunity to have people that are deploying it in real-world operational environments to engage with the development of sort of DNSSEC version 2. So it is practical, it is less fragile, and it is much easier to deploy. So if we don't do that, I mean, it's plateaued. A lot of the browser vendors don't bother with it because they don't like it because of performance. There's a lot of things that need to be done to fix that.
Views on the browser vendors, especially. So the browser vendors always say that they can't do it because it's so many DNS questions and they take so much time, which then they invented their own SRV records, which they now send 5 extra questions, which don't take time for some reason. I have no idea, but the browser vendors have their own political agenda why they don't want to do this. And there's, I don't know why, but that's just something they don't want to do. And that's the reason they're not doing it. There's absolutely nothing in DNSSEC that prevents them from doing it, and especially not time. We don't know. But I agree with the, operator involvement that is absolutely missing. But there is obviously a lot of stuff that you can do to make it easier to deploy. And on the other hand, I would say that, we don't need end users to understand DNSSEC. What we need to do it is operators. We need to be, and these are technical people, so they are not unable to understand it. So it's just, we have to have a way of reaching them and to make them care about it. And I think there's different levels to this. One is that as there's always with security, there is no business case for it. And that is one point we have to address. And then there is educating operators how to do it. But in the beginning, DNSSEC was a lot of manual work, but it isn't any longer. If you just run a DNS server nowadays, it's just yes or no in the configuration, and it just works. And if you're happy enough to be in a TLD that supports CDS scanning, you don't even have to do anything. It just let your domain be signed, and it will magically be in the chain of trust of the DNS. So there has been a lot of work to do this, but we have to. There's still a lot of work to do. I agree. Yes.
Anybody else like to grab the mic with a question or any more responses to what was mentioned?
Just a bit on the sort of policy side of it. Just coming from my discussions, having just come from ICANN and having this discussion, the thing about the business case came up. How do we pose this as a business case to the operators and put this in the browsers? And it's really just a question to you on the panel as well, because I'm not as technical. I'm more policy based. But one of the things came up, which is how often are bad things happening because of a lack of DNSSEC, and how can we show that it's really important to have? Of course I know it's important, but when presenting a business case, because I think it's actually quite low. but I'm not sure what's the answer or how we do it.
So from the CCTLD point of view, have you considered this? How important is it, and how do you sell it as a business case? It's a little bit of memories of IPv6. It was always that nobody wanted to use it, or everyone wanted to use it, but where's the business case? So how do we make a business case? There was a lot of talk in IPv6 about the role of government and procurement. So if you have can you tell your government operator service provider, we're only going to connect with you if you provide DNSSEC there? I mean, what's the role that we can look for operationalizing this? How does it happen in the CCTLDs of the region?
I guess I kind of agree with Georgia, but she said that in the end it's up to the service providers for them to find the value in it, for them to be motivated of enabling DNSSEC, and at this point it seems to be missing. And yes, there is no, we can't say that they will make any money out of this. As it's a security measure, then it means they have to somehow see how they are saving money. And there aren't many cases we can bring to them showing that, okay, this is the event, this is what happened, and you could have prevented this using DNSSEC, so please do enable this. So as I mentioned in my own presentation, these banks, financial institutions, they are constantly doing something to protect their clients, to protect themselves, but DNSSEC is not among these measures, because I'm guessing automation helps, of course. It makes it more accessible, but still, I guess the downside of it, if anything is a bit off, the danger is that all services are currently off, not available over the internet, and this is kind of seems like a bigger problem than maybe this rare event of man-in-the-middle attack or something like that.
Place for it in national cybersecurity policies. Oh, I'm sorry. I just put hearing aids in and I thought I could hear. I know that sounds a bit silly, but anyway. Yeah, is there a... Oh dear. Is there a case for using national cyber policies and so on for encouraging and capacity building and awareness raising? Because it's... business cases are always a nice excuse sometimes, but...
For .lt, there were some talks to have a DNSSEC mandatory for governmental institutions for their domain names, but at the time there were not many registrars to pick from, so that initiative didn't go so far. But I think discussions in this way would be useful. Not that many institutions use DNSSEC as of now in Lithuania.
Yeah, I'm not trying to suggest that we regulate everything again. That's not quite the ICANN position on these issues, but yeah.
I know the Netherlands have been very successful with this internet.nl, where they have this, not really regulation, but they have this, public agencies, whoever should, follow this, should implement DNSSEC, and then you have they actually do public measurement and have like a, blame and shame list, you could say, but you could also say showing the good examples. You pick your choice of list you want to look at to show who follows it. And actually agencies could say that they don't do it, and but then they have to make a write-up why they don't do it, and that seems to be enough for them to be motivated to implement it, because they don't have to do a write-up, and that's a form of a more soft regulation, I would say, which could already be enough to do it. So it's
yeah, the internet.nl site, if you ever interested, it's quite fun to look at, because you find that ICANN.org at one point was not compliant with something, and when you hear that in a presentation, it actually, you sit there as a policy person, you think, hang on a minute, why are we not compliant? And hopefully the companies in the audience will think the same thing, and you take that message back into your corporation, into your not-for-profit, into whatever it would be, and it's a very good soft way of doing it. We're hoping to add universal acceptance to their measurements, so we can find out, are the systems compliant for IDNs and so on. So it's adding these layers of check to different types of things. So have a look at internet.nl and see how it goes. It's a project that the government is quite proud of, but it's independent of government. So, yeah.
So I can add that while I was still at .se, we had a project where we would collect the, let's say, 1,000 most important domains for Sweden, and then we would do measurements on them using DNSSEC, having TLS for their mail servers, and some security stuff on their websites, and then we would give them points, like in the Eurovision, 12 points, That's in Sweden it is very popular. So anyway, then we would do for specific industries, we would make a list of, that's the top best performers in your industry, and then we would try to meet the industry in some, the bank association and the universities and government-owned companies and stuff like that, and we would meet the meeting of the CEOs or the CISOs or something like that. And suddenly these people would be, competing in who got the 12 points and who got only 10. And it made them actually improve their overall security just because, at the time I had an English teacher. And so to improve my English, and so we had to talk about my work. I talked about this project, and she said, okay, you have a homework, write an email to the CEO of a bank. And so I wrote this letter, and she actually knew a CEO of a bank, and she forwarded that email. So 2 weeks later, we get an email from the bank, and it's like, yeah, our CEO got this email, and we need to get at least as many points as this other bank. So so it's even this, and something this simple can just make people do it. And so we have to come up with some projects that we can do, and
So we can take this away to the CCNSO and others, and I'm sure the British Chamber of Commerce in Stockholm got 0 point or whatever it is that we always get in Eurovision, so thank you very much for that. But
I can relate as a German, we are not far from the points.
Yeah. No, but I think that's the right answer, is to look for practical solutions that are not necessarily expensive, but can also be encouraging and an element of not exactly fun, but there's competition there, and that always spurs us on a little bit. So good. So we'll take that to the CCNSO agenda. I think we can ask them to have a game. So yeah, where do we go next? Are there any questions? I see anything from the back you want to ask these wonderful panelists that you've heard this morning, or I'll ask a.
Maybe from Zoom there are questions.
Oh, of course, yes, we have people online. Is there any questions online at the moment? Anyway, never mind. So I'll ask the ridiculous one that people always ask, which is in elements of DNS security, what keeps you up awake at night? What frightens you and worries you the most? And what's the one fix that you would introduce? So something a little negative and then something a little positive towards a fix. So we've got one small fix. We're going to do competitions to show who does things best. But what's your fear? Who would like to pick on the one thing that worries you in DNS operations and security? Nothing, because it's all brilliant, because ICANN's involved, so it must be excellent. So thank you very much for that. No, I mean, is there something that's particularly worrying? You can point, and probably the thing that not only worries you, but you think there are opportunities to resolve.
Well. worries me, I think, is not so much technology, but policy. I think there's so much policy, and there's, I mean, I know that the cybersecurity center here did this, you know, the DNS firewall, and it's really good, but it's, I mean, there's this, from there, it's a very small step to censorship. A very, very small step. And how, you know, to find that line, but where is it protection and where is it censorship, is not that easy. And I think we are in a time where we unfortunately have to worry about that.
Thoughts on that? Sorry?
I'm still in the previous question. I think that regarding the law and compliance, I can share Latvian experience. So I think in law we have DMARC requirement, but we don't have anything about DNSSEC yet. So that's an interesting jump, because if we remember the timeline I draw, so DNSSEC was there before, and so we jumped directly to securing email, but it's still based on the DNS protocol, and DNSSEC in turn secures DNS. So there is a different order. So we somehow skipped that part, probably because we also lawmakers understand maybe it's more complex thing, let's do that later. But at least I know that for government it will change probably, and that initiative will be there, and at least Go sites should be DNSSEC signed, and other security protocols implemented. So.
Is it similar for .e and LT, or is it, where are we?
Okay. Where to begin? I guess there are no big issues. I'm just hopeful that my presentation doesn't motivate our biggest registrar to stop doing DNSSEC, because why bother? But what I maybe just a bit of trolling from my part to this whole topic is just to kind of raise a question: should there be a role for security in DNS at all? Or maybe we should kind of concentrate on what the DNS was created for, name resolution, and leave the security bit to the other layers of the internet transport stack. So we would get fast, more efficient DNS. As a result, we would get more simpler to implement DNS, better, simpler to troubleshoot, and more scalable DNS. So there are a lot of pros on, I guess, keeping the DNS as it is, and leaving the security for transport layer, for application layer. That actually seems to be the way that most of the service providers are choosing at this point.
Somewhat forcing the DNS to do things that it wasn't necessarily
kind of
originally designed to do.
Overcomplicating.
Yeah, complicated.
Some services will shift away from DNS, and then what we are going to serve. So maybe it will be replaced by a different, DNS will be replaced by a different technology in that case. I think it's a risky path for us. So let's do things in the existing environment, I think.
Don't replace it just yet.
What I'm hearing now, it looks like we are late to the DNSSEC party as a .lt, and it looks like people are going away now. So the complication of DNSSEC, I think, comes from a scope of requirements. I mean, if the idea would have been at the protocol to have a real-time signing, it would be much more simple. But the requirements were that secondaries, for example, should be able to serve the zone, but not to have assigning keys. So that's why the protocol is actually complicated for the operator. But as was mentioned, it is now possible to enable it without that much headache. So I hope the adoption rates will not stall, and we will move forward with what we have.
Comments, Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful. We had a technologist earlier saying he's kept up at night by policy, and it'd be wonderful if me as a policy person said I was kept up at night by technology. But it is still policy for me, and I think this conversation about the policy and how it can relate to the technology itself and how it's deployed in. I guess what keeps me really up at night right now is the NIS2 regulations. And I think it's interesting because it's obviously a really substantial piece of cybersecurity legislation that covers all sorts of things. But the DNS industry, we're the only ones concerned about Article 28 and actually 21 as well. And in my conversations with a lot of people, the main worry is Article 21, it seems, which is on cybersecurity risk management measures. And I'm going to read now, so apologies. Paragraph 1 states that member states shall ensure that essential and important entities take appropriate and proportional technical, operational, and organizational measures to manage the risks posed to the security of network and information systems, which those entities use for their operations or for the provision of their services, and to prevent or minimize the impact of incidents on recipients of their services or other services. So it's quite a big thing to ask, I think, for particularly small CCTLDs or small, it's a lot to ask of them, not only for the data collection and verification of it all, which is also a big thing, but also the kind of risk management of the cybersecurity that it kind of imposes on them, and how that will come out in their legislation. And so it's sort of a complex thing that happens. Also, just by the way, they have to do this apparently by October. So I don't know if we have too much time there, but that is definitely what keeps me up at night, is thinking about that, which makes me a very fun person. But
Yeah, please.
So for each Baltic registry, I would like to ask, following Georgia's comment on NIS2, what's your thoughts on the role of national cybersecurity incident response teams in enhancing or raising awareness on DNSSEC application, basically, or use? How they can actually help us with that?
Difficult question, but I think as TLDs we gave opportunity to get the DNSSEC rolling because we are signed, and yeah, I'll maybe pass to.
Well, I think that national security centers have direct connections with critical infrastructure managers, so I think we can actually encourage, maybe not regulate or make it mandatory, but encourage to use DNSSEC for at least critical infrastructure sites.
Well, we are in quite good relationship with Estonian CERT, so we are in constant communication with them, discussing what to do, how to do, and they are kind of promoting DNSSEC already as we speak, mostly to government institutions, and uptake there is there, but I don't know what they could do more, other than if you don't want to cross the line of making it mandatory or forcing it on anyone. But maybe this kind of soft approach that we have used till now is kind of the way. But how to, then again, how to reach these private sector companies? That's a totally different kind of question.
What Georgia was reading out is the opposite of soft report, approach. It's, going on to paragraph 2, it goes into more detail about the type of reporting you will do on, incident handling and policies that you have, and information system security, all of which means documentation, I imagine, and then the documentation will be reviewed and checked, and so the details are quite interesting. Do you have a follow-up comment on, you asked the question, are you comfortable with would you like to follow up on that? And then, the one behind you, then you answer.
So follow-up, yes indeed, the NIS2 requires actually to make risk management, and this could be a part, and I see that at least in Latvia, those recommendations from National CERT are there in place, and I want to point out that NIS2 directive is more not just about critical infrastructure, it's also about private sectors, and it will be applied on national level on really large or broad spectrum of private institutions as well. So this is the chance actually to promote also the DNSSEC.
Clara and then Andrew.
If I could just quickly
Yes,
up.
please.
Just on your point, it is really interesting as well because the NIS2 directive, it isn't just member states again who will be affected. There's a whole ecosystem that will be affected. It explicitly calls out proxy privacy providers and resellers, and it's interesting to see how many and if the draft legislative texts in the national texts also call out proxy and privacy providers and resellers. So I think there's an interesting question that you've raised, and an important one around, extraterritoriality, but also how much of the ecosystem will actually be affected, because I think it's a bit unsure, and I think it's a good opportunity for DNSSEC to really kind of be pushed, I think. But, yeah.
I wonder if there's a connection to what Ulrich was mentioning about imposing policy through the DNS. So that is a slightly different point, but if we have protective DNS in the UK and DNS for EU, that at the moment it's providing good services, but you can also use it to impose a policy by putting conditions through that DNS resolver. So it's sort of, where does this go from here is a sort of interesting question, so we'll see. But there is the .nl Internet for All, or whatever it is, so the Dutch come to the rescue yet again. Clara, thank you.
Staying sort of with the topic of the regulation, because that's what I love, just like Georgia. So let's just say, we're leaving behind the encouragement. We are now mandating DNSSEC in national regulation. Ulrich did point out one potential downfall or downside of it. Could the other practitioner talk about what could be other risks if this is mandated? And, again, we understand the benefits. If it's mandated, what would be some of the challenges from your perspective? Thank you.
Gentlemen.
I think one thing is that in legislation there are usually no fines involved, so I may be mistaken, my lawyer will be, but I don't, so it's a requirement, and then maybe you can ignore it, maybe. So it's maybe a suggestion, please implement DNSSEC. We can start with please, and then go up, and so even that, if it's in a law, sometimes it encourages somebody to do something, because if it's not written there, they might ignore it because they have some other activities to do. That's what we see also in that some operators will just say that, hey, this is not a requirement, this is just business, we will do something else. And if we have something, please, would you by year 26 implement something with DNSSEC, and then by few years later, it's a mandatory for all your domains. So.
Evolutionary approach towards things. Should we move down, and if you don't have a response, that's fine, but we'll move down from to my right. So Georgia, please.
Yeah, just a quick one, just around the fines. So unfortunately, I mean, there are fines, but I guess it's up to how you put it in your legislative texts, and that's very different according to different member states. And it's something that, how different member states are implementing this or what they are prioritizing is important. But, for example, if it was mandated in one of the texts, the fine is at least 10 million euros, or a maximum, or as a maximum, at least 2% of the total worldwide annual turnover in the preceding financial year of the undertaking to which the essential entity belongs, whichever is higher. So depending on what you've put in or what the text says, it could be pretty steep. And I just wanted to raise that because that could be something going forward about, mandating DNSSEC. Is that a good thing given that the fines are so steep?
Gosh. Europe is pretty good at finding things,
Sorry.
isn't it?
I think I've opened up a can of worms.
Right.
Of course, there's always this thing, it's the pesky details. So I think, obviously I like DNSSEC, but actually there is problems with DNSSEC, operational problems. Moving a DNSSEC signed domain from one registrar to the next isn't really easy. It is something that, it's a handful of people on the planet that can do it. So it's, so I think so that there is problem with this, and there is problems we, as a community, as a technical community, need to solve, I think, to make this really feasible. But on the other hand, I would say this will become feasible if, let's say, I think TLDs could play a role in this. If more TLDs would say, we want to have 100% DNSSEC signed by 2030 or 2035, pick a date, then you would have to think backwards. What do we need to do to get there? What is the steps? What do people need to do with their domains? Which business cases do we need to? Which use cases do we need to solve? And all of that, so that we can get to that point where it really is feasible for everybody to do this. That a DNSSEC signed domain is as easy to move and as easy to register as a not signed domain. And I think that is something that we as an industry need to solve to really make this something that a regulator can think of and say, yeah, of course, no-brainer.
Well, I believe there definitely are challenges and hurdles in implementing DNSSEC, but on the other hand, much time has passed from the early days, and it wouldn't be fair to say that it's extremely complicated right now. In Lithuania, we have a cybersecurity law which has a table of requirements for critical infrastructure, governmental institutions, and so on. And National CERT is sending this questionnaire every year, where you have to fill in if you are implementing all the requirements. So stuff like HTTPS and wireless encryption is there, and I believe that DNSSEC could also be just another item on the table.
Maybe I'm wrong here, but as I understand, what NIS2 is doing is kind of forcing risk management on top of different companies, organizations, but it doesn't say specifically what they need to do or how do they need to deal with these risks. So basically what the company might do is say that, okay, we see this is a risk, we feel that it's a low risk, and we choose to ignore. And with that, you have avoided the 10 million fine without doing anything, basically. So it's a kind of opportunistic view, so to say, to see that, okay, maybe we can promote DNSSEC here, and maybe we should do it. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but But yeah, there are other ways of getting around this, and if these companies, these critical companies, haven't seen the value in it yet, then something has to change before they start implementing it. If we don't kind of do it in a legislative way, let's say, forcing it on them. But what this is, I don't know. Yeah, maybe what we discussed earlier, that the operational view that is missing, it's too complicating. The risks of it when it fails are too high. So we need to kind of attend. Maybe the DNSSEC 2 is kind of the answer. Redesign everything.
Yes, NIS2 is looking. I shouldn't have started reading it. It's quite worrying. Clara, are you okay with the response? Thank you. And Emilia.
Can I? Yeah, thank you very much. Emilia Zalewska-Czajczyńska, National Research Institute, NASC. I am the cybersecurity policy expert. First of all, thank you very much, Georgia, for bringing NIS2 directive topic, because I think it is very crucial. Like in our institute, we work on the NIS2 directive on the more general level, because we are also the CSIRT for different Polish organizations. So I have opportunity to visit different conferences for different sectors. As you know, the NIS2 has in its scope very diverse range of sectors like waste, chemistry, production. And the awareness is still very low, even though we are approaching the final date. So it is great that here in this area there is this discussion, but it is just a side comment. So what I would like to maybe also ask you and ask about your opinion, because you are talking about mandating the DNSSEC as the part of the NIS2 compliance, because there is also in the NIS2 the option for the Commission to actually adopt implementing acts that will lay down the technical and methodical requirements, and also some sectoral requirements. So maybe this is a place to start the discussion. I think it would be very important for the technical community to be also involved in the discussion with the Commission if, for example, this is something to be considered. So I am interested in what is your take on that.
Lady and gentleman.
I'll go ahead, but I'm only going to talk for a small time, because I think it is really important that the technical community are involved in this conversation, especially when it comes to DNSSEC and how to basically help the industry see that its value and why it's important and why they should use it. And I think naturally it should come from the technical community to bring it out there, and for the policy community to hear them, and to help around the NIS2 regulations itself, because it is, sorry, it's a bit of a mess. So I will let you guys tackle that one.
Probably too little involved in an NIS2 assessment, and I'm waiting probably for my legal colleagues to crystallize what should we do and what are the priorities. So, and I admit maybe I should involve more, yeah, to know the requirements. But,
yeah, well, it's difficult for me to advocate more requirements for NIS2. I think lots of operators are scared as it is right now. So
we don't have the local legislation in place yet, so we don't actually know what is coming. We only see what the European Union has kind of proposed as a directive, but how this will be implemented is still a kind of a question. So we are kind of waiting to see what happens. If the Estonian government is as eager as they are usually taking everything in and maybe turning it even up a notch, or we see a bit more maybe easier approach. Don't know yet.
I think that the technical community has a lot to say. I think there's a problem of communication, as always. But so what I would say is that the problem is, let's give you another example. I have had discussions with the Swedish regulator, and they, for the first NIS directive, when they were looking on DNS and how should they regulate the DNS services, and it was like, and you know, the ITF had this saying you have to have 2 different name servers in 2 different ASs, blah, blah, blah. And that's a good rule, you know, but what if I have any cast service in 150 places in the world that uses just one IP address? Is that better? Is that worse? Which do I need to follow? Should I decommission 150 servers and just put 2 servers somewhere in Sweden, and that is much better? So there needs to be an understanding about, you know, this regulation, about there's a lot we can do technically, and there's regulation is very, you know, once it is a regulation, it's really hard to you know, work around. And so we need to make this so that things get into it, just that you cannot get away with 2 servers in one data center, but still, if you have something better, you should be able to use it. So, and I think that is something that we need a lot of discussions around how we can do this.
We're sort of coming to the end of the session, and there is somebody in the room who I think is probably about the best policy watcher in Brussels. Hello, Paulina. So just to put Paulina on the spot, do you have any comments on what Centre is doing and how you're helping with the education around these issues, or generally what you think we should be doing? Because if anybody knows, you do. So there you go.
Thanks, Adam, for putting me on spot and asking the most difficult question from me. But I just wanted to maybe reflect to your question a little bit. Indeed, the implementation acts are coming, but there's also another important group that I think will give input to the to the Commission's work on that, and that is the NIS Cooperation Group, that not only works on Article 28 implementation, as we know, but also has done already some work also on TLT security measures as a guidelines document under previous NIS directive. And if we look at the evolution of the NIS2 and the cybersecurity risk management measures under NIS, the first NIS directive, then of course the NIS2 expands a bit on that, but it still retains the original cybersecurity measures. And I just looked up the document, and because I had to refresh my memories about this, but the NSEC is heavily already featured in that NIS Cooperation Group guidelines document, which is of course voluntary for now, and it might become maybe more mandatory with implementing acts. But so there are already quite, let's say, substantial support given by the authorities, the supervisory authorities, towards the DNSX. So there is that support there as well. So we'll see. But of course, as Centre, we're involved and in those conversations together with our members, and we actually think that particular TOD security measures document was quite well drafted. So we're just hoping that Commission will not start from scratch, but will use the existing work that has already been done by the member states. So that's.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists for, I mean, you've worked all morning to reach this, and then you get someone who doesn't know anything about security trying to moderate your session, because I do policy. But thank you very much. It's been enlightening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Have lunch. Cheers.
Thank you very much for moderating such a complex questions topic, and thank you very much. And I want to say thank to all attendees and on site and online, and especially special thanks for all experts who shared their views, shared their expertise, answered questions, and I hope you will have a nice day in Vilnius, and maybe you will stay for longer and to see not only Vilnius but around Lithuania. So have a good day, and our conference is closed. Thank you.